Good afternoon. Welcome to APA's weekly webinar series. My name is Billy Zydick, Standards and Codes Administrator for APA. Just a couple of housekeeping items before we get started. The webinar recording will be posted to the APA webpage later this afternoon. You will receive a follow-up email in the next couple of days with a link to the webpage where all webinar recordings are housed, as well as a link to our upcoming webinars and COVID-19 town halls. We have webinars planned out through December 2020, and many are open for registration. All attendees are in listen-only mode. Please type your questions in the chat box, and they will be answered in the order they are received during our Q&A session. If we run out of time and we still have questions, responses will be sent directly to the person asking the question by our presenter. Professional continuing education credits for ISDs, PDHs, and AIA CLUs are being offered. For AIA certificates, please send an email to Billy, B-I-L-L-I-E, @APA.org with your membership number. The number of webinar attendees requesting certificates is growing, so it might take a couple of days to get your certificate. At this time, it's my pleasure to turn this over to Kevin Rausch. Kevin, take it away.
Thanks, Billy. My name is Kevin Rausch, and I'm with Asset Works. I'm the Director of Marketing, and really my role is pretty simple today. It's my pleasure to introduce our main presenter, Glenn Adams, who's the Director of Product Management at Asset Works. Glenn has a background. He was with the Navy and worked at Auburn University in facilities for a number of years. So he has some great industry experience in order to present this topic. He's been with Asset Works now for, I think, about 6 years. Correct me if I'm wrong, Glenn. But at this point, it's my pleasure to turn things over to Glenn Adams. I think you're muted, Glenn.
There we go. It was locked up. All right. Thank you so much. Let me restart this real fast. Yeah, that was weird. I was clicking on it. It was completely locked up. Okay, guys, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here today. As Kevin mentioned, with Asset Works, I'm Director of Product. And what I wanted to do, we were kind of talking about what topic we could offer and how we could share some educational value to the members of APA. And I wanted to revisit something that some of you may be familiar with, and for a lot of you, you may not be as familiar with. And I think it's a capital planning strategy that really lends itself to this, this changing time where we're going to have to justify a lot of our needs. We're going to have real conversations about strategic mission and goals and what we want to accomplish. And so we're going to spend the next 45 minutes really talking about property portfolio analysis. And, when I think about what you're doing now, and I talk to a lot of people that are out there at universities and state and local governments and the things they're facing. And, obviously the big things are ensuring work is performed safely and legally. Right? That's number one thing. They're also checking with vendors, right, to see who's open, and more people are opening every day, who has availability, investigating the availability of items with long lead times, right? These are all very tactical things that you guys are actually doing. But eventually, there's a couple of things that are going to happen, right? And the first thing is we're probably reviewing already approved projects we haven't started yet. Are they still a go? Do we still have the funding? Is everybody with the new understanding of the new world order, right? Are we still going to go ahead and move forward with that project? And then, eventually I have a couple dots, there is going to be a point where we're going to have to start planning for the future. And the first thing that they're going to ask us for is a capital update, right? So whether that's coming from the Board of Trustees or the Chancellor's office or whatever your organizational structure is, there's going to have to be a conversation about the renewed budget and funding requirements moving forward and what our goals are and what we're going to accomplish and plan for. So, to help foster that conversation, to help prepare you and give you a strategy that I think will work wonderfully for these conversations, I wanted to, just really call out the strengths and the process Now, this is something that obviously we've built into our software. I'm a big believer of it, been a champion of it, but we're not alone. There are other people that do this. This is a strategy that can be used on a notepad or an Excel spreadsheet, right? So this is absolutely applicable to everybody that's out there and what we can use and how we can do this. So property portfolio analysis, right? The big three things, big three takeaways. One, I think it really aligns the mission and vision to the execution, right? The strategic all the way down to tactical. We know that we're out there spending money and we're accomplishing and executing, but is what we're doing aligned with what we should be doing, right? With the actual mission, not just the mission of facilities, not just the mission of estates, where we're focused on building the best facilities and making, we know that mission. I'm talking about the mission of the institution, right? Are we focused on things like research? Are we focused on, visitor experience or safety? Or what is the actual mission of the institution right now as we see it heading into the expenditure of this money? And is the project that I'm working on aligned with that mission? Right? It also encourages leaders at a higher level to make investment decisions versus picking projects. Right? It fosters more of that. There will always be pet projects and picking projects. I'm not naive to that. None of us are. But if we can have a bigger discussion about why we would spend money versus what we're going to spend money on in particular, then that really helps. The other thing we can do is we can kind of look at the big picture versus focusing on the latest, loudest event. That is going to be a very difficult thing that we're going to have to do moving forward right here in the next, 12 to 18 months. The latest, loudest event is really loud, and it is gonna take a lot of our resources, and it is gonna influence a lot of things. But as we're looking at a 3 to 5 year look ahead, we have to remember that if we do too much focus or too much funding, if we take away too much from other things that are also vital, right, we could end up hurting ourselves in the long run. So property portfolio analysis, I think, really helps with these big three things. And really, when I talk about the big picture, whenever we really just discuss what is the capital planning process and what are we trying to accomplish, I kind of show this big circular wheel, this process. The first thing to me, it always comes down to assessment. Do I even understand what it is that needs to be done? And there are a variety of different levels, right? We can do full condition assessments. We can do building condition modeling. We can do, projects or evaluations. We can have vendors come in. We can do self-analysis, whatever it is. Right, I'm not going to get down in the weeds and what's best or what's right for your institution, but the idea is, do you have the credible data to make decisions around? Do you feel confident that you are making decisions based on what the actual needs are of your institution? So assessment in the verb form is super important. The second thing, multi-year investment plan. Right? Are we actually setting a vision statement of what it is that we want to accomplish as an institution? Right? Are we thinking about that across the entire campus or campuses? Right? And are we using that to influence step 3, which is our actual project selection and funding? Right? Are we just making a list and checking it twice and then just pulling the top 5? Or are we trying to be a little bit more strategic about that? Right? Hopefully we are, and we can add that step 2 in if we're not already doing it. Once we actually get our projects, right, we add our bundle and our needs, we create our capital requests, capital budget requests, they get approved, then we execute on it, right? And so what we're going to try and focus on today is just kind of briefly talk about assessment, talk about the multi-year investment plan a lot more, and really just focus on kind of the right-hand side of this circle, right? The actual execution of it, the project selection, right? That is what you're going to do, and when, it's going to be influenced by our conversation today, hopefully. So when I talk about the needs library, what am I really talking about, right? Let me just be a little bit more clear about that. To us, it really breaks down to the 2 things, your recurring investment and your non-recurring investment. So recurring investment being your systems and components that the moment you install them, they start breaking down. They've got a physical life, they need to be replaced. But maybe they don't even need to be replaced. Maybe what they really just need is a non-recurring investment because they really need to be refurbished. Right? Things like a parking lot or a roof, or we know all of them, right? Electrical distribution system in a building, right? Where we're going to request funding and we're going to take something that used to be awesome, now is less awesome, and we're going to make it awesome again, right? And so we need to kind of make a list of those and understand what those things are coming from and where they're coming from and what's impacting them. Now, there are a whole bunch of new things that we have to consider in this post-COVID world. Right? There's a lot of things that we're doing as far as, you know, no touch entrances. You know, I've heard some really neat examples just on these webinars about sneeze guards and additional entrances and barriers for places where people are living together or working together. You know, all these things, these are additional needs, and they may be considered more of the non-recurring investment type, right? Actually going in and putting these in one time. They might not rise to the level of capital, you know, renewal where we're going to track them for replacement, but we need to have this list. We need to understand what this list is, and then we need to think about that as a grand whole. How do these new things mixed in with the other things affect the decisions that I would make? Now, wherever you are on your spectrum, right, wherever you are on your assessment journey, you can do this. Right? You can do this strategy. So if you just, right now, if all you're doing is really just thinking about your major system deficiencies, right? 7 major systems in the building, and I'm going through and I'm really interviewing my, you know, the people, my team that is out working in those buildings, and I'm capturing the, you know, the advice from them. I'm telling us what we need to do in these buildings, and we're capturing these needs. At the end of this, you're going to come up with a list. Now, how detailed that list is depends really on where your journey is as you kind of move from left to right on this spectrum, right? But the biggest thing I would want is I want you to feel confident in your list. The moment that you move a little bit too far to the right on this and your confidence goes down because you can't keep that data accurate and up to date in a way that you don't feel like, oh, this is a great list, but this is like a 2-year-old list. You know what I mean? It kind of captures it, but I know there's stuff missing. You don't ever want to feel that way. Right? You want to feel that you are making decisions off a credible list of data that you have. So, right, when we talk about this, we break things down from a property level. We look at the systems within that property, and then sometimes we go down to the major components, right? But it really is done at a property level. When I talk about needs, I'm talking about property needs. And property, you can substitute building, you can substitute lake, you can substitute streets. I know, you know, that's why I do a very vague property. But the idea is we've got something, it has a major system, it has components of that system, and I'm going to track my needs against that somewhere on this spectrum. All right, so please make sure that you have that list and you feel great about that list. And once we got that list, then we move forward, right? And the move forward is planning. It's evaluating, it's prioritizing. We're going to collect information about these needs, right? Some of it might be cost information, cost estimates. Some of it might be urgency, criticality, right? How important is it to the system it's within? How important is it to the institution? I always joke, right? My air handler was never as important as the air handler that was feeding the president's office, right? Same shot, same size, same shape, everything, and one is way less important than the other one. Right? So we understand that we have these, and they're all different sizes and shapes, but we have a list of needs. And so the traditional model, right? And it still happens in a lot of places. The traditional model was, well, I'm just going to kind of put them in a list, and I'm going to prioritize them 1 to 10, and that worked fine at the very top of the list, right? I could walk into any place in America, and I could say, tell me your top 5, right? They just rattle them right off. But the conversation gets a little bit more difficult when we start to drill into maybe 8, 9, or 10, or maybe 50 to 52, you know, and further down the list, the lack of clarity of why I would be doing something versus where and versus what it is, you know, it just isn't there, right? And we're always focused kind of on just that top 10, where what happens is you lose a lot of those strategic goals. You lose the idea of, is this supporting the mission, or is this just the worst roof? You know, you're losing if I spent a large majority of my recent funding in one mission or one spot on campus just because that was all built around the same time and they're all come due, but then I've got other parts of campus and other strategic missions that are being left unfunded continuously. Right, so these are some of the downfalls that can happen from a single prioritized list. So we have some other strategies that we can use, and one of them that you guys are very familiar with, right, is the Facilities Condition Index. And this really focuses on the where. And what it tries to do is it tries to bring in this concept of if I know where it is, and I kind of can bundle all the lists, you know, of all my needs by building, I can come up with this little ratio that really lets me understand the level of imperfection in my building. And I'm going to go through this pretty quickly. I'm not going to belabor facilities condition index. I know a lot of you guys know it, right? But by prioritizing these things in there, what I can do is kind of take all this stuff that I should have done that I haven't done yet, what we'll call deferred renewal. I can put it over top of the replacement value of the building, and I get a ratio. And wherever that thing falls, that lets me know how imperfect my building is, right? Because there's always a level of imperfection of every building. But the ones that are really imperfect, then we need to make some tough decisions, and we need to fund, and we need to focus on. Now, this index can be used just straight to list my buildings, right? So I can have this whole list of buildings, and then I can take my needs and kind of focus them on these buildings. Right, Green Hall is the most imperfect building, but it's important to my mission. So it's like the big thing is it's #1. And then after that, even when I go do my #2 priorities, I'm gonna really put more green stuff in there because I really need to make a difference in Green Hall. You see, what I'm doing is I'm kind of letting this overall level of imperfection drive my planning, and I'm also letting the location, right, the where conversation of the building influence how I would plan and where I would put my money, right? This is a very valid way to do it. And I think it actually, to me, it's a very important criteria among many that we should use. I saw a presentation on here not more than a week or so ago where I believe it was Penn State, and they had FCI, and then they had mixed in about 4 other criteria that were important to them. And that let them, kind of pull together a much more prioritized and for them, listing of needs and projects and things that they wanted to focus on. All right, so FCI is great. It's a factor. But another way that we could look about this is when we get into kind of a long-term, right, and more of an investment plan, is we can start thinking about the idea of why I would do it, not necessarily just where it is, right? So there are some common categories that you can use, right? So these were taught to me a long time ago, and I think they're pretty common, and there are others that you can come up with, but some common, ways that you can think about this planning groups are like, well, the reason I would invest in an electrical distribution system in a building is because I need it to be reliable, right? I have $1 million worth of research going on in that building right now, and that thing can't fail. It can't just go to garbage on a Friday night and then, we losing research because the temperature raises, whatever the reason is, right? You guys get it. It's the reliability, asset preservation. Why do I, take care of the outside of a building or the grounds or whatever? Program improvement. Why would I invest in a lab renovation? Because we're getting this big money researchers come in and we're trying to be an R1, whatever it is. You see, we're getting at the root mission of why would we do something rather than, well, it's carpet, the carpet's old, so that's why we're going to do it. Well, there's more to that, right? And another reason, of course, is safety and code. And once you can classify your needs by the reason why, then what we end up doing is we get to have a little bit better conversation about the prioritization of needs. It is notoriously difficult to rank needs when you're talking about the 13th safety item versus the 8th asset preservation. But it's safety. Well, but this is, it's very difficult to rank those against each other. And then the other thing we can do is we can mix in brand new things, right? If you understand the reason why you would do something when new things arise, then we can actually mix these things in very quickly by coming up with another planning group. Why would I do the sneeze guard, installation? Why would I do these no-touch entries? Well, that is directly related to our COVID-19 response. And now, as you're just mixing things into the list of all the other stuff, understanding the reason why you would do something allows you to prioritize and rank and look at these things in a different way. Right, so the vision of this is going to come together here pretty soon, a couple slides from now. But I do want to just keep talking about this classification structure. So another reason why sometimes we want to be in times of trouble, times like this, what we want to do is not be so vague about the reason why, right? One of the reasons why could be program improvement, but maybe I have 30 of those in my backlog. But maybe what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull out the 7 that are directly related to distance learning, right? And so now I can give it a more specific reason why. I can pull in just those 7 into my plan. And as I'm starting to bundle and rank things together, I really understand a very specific mission that I'm trying to accomplish, right? I'm mission oriented. I'm thinking about the reason why. And next, what we do is we go ahead and list these out by the reason why, and we prioritize them not against the entire list, but against each other. Right? This becomes less of a conversation of the fifth safety issue versus the fifth reliability. This is much more what I call the eye exam test, right? If anybody's ever gotten their eyes tested for glasses, you know, they kind of come in and they give you one lens, and this is lens A, and they flip it up and put down lens B, and they say A or B, which one looks better? Right? Which one is better for you? Which one is more important? Which one has a higher priority, right? In this example. So you can kind of go down the reliability list from the bottom up, right? And say, well, should we do 7 or 6? Let's look at our information. Let's make an evaluation, 7 or 6. Okay, 6 or 5, 5 or 4. You know, and what you're doing is you're ranking really apples against apples and oranges against oranges. Then you're not trying to go across the lists. So as you get your list of the reason why, you get your needs in these lists, we're about to bring in a whole nother concept. And this concept has to do with the portfolio. All right, so a property portfolio was a list of properties that we can put together, and they can be bundled in a variety of different ways. Really, one way is by the mission of the building, the primary mission of the building. We know that buildings have multi-missions sometimes, but really the overall primary mission of the building is what we're after. So when we think about a building, one of the things could be like a teaching and research building, right? So it could be right there. Another one could be student life, business support, whatever. I mean, I'm not into property classes. I'm not saying this is an admin building versus a dorm, right? I'm talking about what's the mission of this building? Why do we even have this building at all? So that is one way, and I think that's kind of nice for this type of event, right? Where we're going to be focused on kind of, you know, a step-by-step reintroduction. And so what we might want to do is look at this as, you know, right now what we need to focus on is student life, where the students are going to be able to come back to campus, and we're going to focus on teaching and research and where they're actually going to live, you know, and where they're going to go to classes and where they're going to be. You know, so there are different ways that we can do this, but what you're doing is you're bundling buildings together because you're trying to make strategic decisions, right? You're trying to look at that and say, where do I want to spend my money? Where do I want to make an impact in my campus? You know, another way to do it is if there is a specific mission, right? Just to kind of expand this concept out a little bit larger. If there was a particular prioritization from the university level of something that they wanted to accomplish that was being spread out across everybody, right? So, you know, an example that I've heard before used many times was the, you know, kind of attrition rate, where you might have something like the freshman year experience, right? And you know, this is, I've seen this in presentations. It's a great example. It's a great anecdote, you know, where the chancellor comes down and says, we have freshmen leaving, they're not coming back sophomore year across the entire university. We're going to use, you know, we're going to make a difference for the freshman year experience. And then it comes to the facility side, and you have to figure out, well, how am I going to make a difference? Well, we're going to make a difference is because we're going to have great facilities for them to live, learn, do, you know, eat, everything in. And so what we could do is we could make a bundle, call it the freshman year experience. You could have the different properties in there. And then from that, you could add in all the needs. And so when they come back and you're trying to have a discussion with the powers that be, and you say, what I want to do is invest in my freshman year experience portfolio, you have now just aligned carpet replacement and air handler replacement and paint and deferred renewal with the actual strategic mission of something that somebody's actually trying to accomplish. And that's where the magic happens. That's where the Venn diagram overlaps. That's where the funding happens. That's where they say yes instead of why. They understand why, because they're the ones that came up with the idea. Right? So a property portfolio, you want to think a little bit outside the box sometimes about matching it to the mission of what you're trying to accomplish. In this example, I think for what we're trying to accomplish, maybe, you know, building them something like this would make a lot of sense. So you've got your portfolio, you've got your buildings inside it. You understand that. You also have all of your needs that were listed by planning group. But remember that we also know where every single one of these needs is because we have tagged it with a building, a property. So now we start to blend these two together and we end up with a listing of a portfolio with the planning groups. And we can have another portfolio with the planning groups. So now we're ready to have a strategic discussion. And we're not down at necessarily at the project level, we're a level above that. right? We're actually talking about the, kind of the teaching and research mission, and then talking about, well, what is it that we're doing? Why would we even want to do this? Well, I've got some systems in there that really need some money, so they'll be reliable, right? I have some specific needs related to COVID-19 that I would really like to do in the teaching and research portfolio. They might not even care about specifically which building. Now, they'll always have their pet projects, right? But really what they're trying to do is you're trying to have a strategic discussion. We need to do this investment in this portfolio of buildings so we can accomplish this. And remember that this is all based upon the needs that you created, your original list. So if you think about the COVID-19 for teaching and research, maybe I need 74,000 specific dollars. Well, I can always drill into that and I can see my prioritized list for the buildings and these are actual needs, right? This would be to install this, to replace this, to refurbish this. And then it's the sum of that leads me to this discussion. So now when we're trying to think about where would we want to spend our limited funds, right? They're going to give us some type of budget. We're going to come in and try and stick to that budget. And maybe then we have a really frank discussion about maybe just over the next 12 months, what do we want to spend? Maybe it's just over the next 9 months. I don't know. We could do this multiple times, right? Maybe they say, look, we're going to go ahead and knock out the stuff for distance learning, safety, COVID, like that is our #1 priority now. I'm going to fully fund that for these. The asset preservation stuff, we're going to skip for now, right? It's just not a priority. We need to save our money. It's an easy place. I agree with you that one system is very unreliable, so we're going to invest in that, but we're not going to invest in the other ones right now. So now I have just dropped your request in this particular portfolio to a certain amount. We understand how much money we're going to be investing in that portfolio, and we can move on, and we can do that over all our portfolios, right? We can have just some common mission-oriented discussions. Right? Maybe I want to spend more money on clinical care, right? Because it's like if those systems go down, I can't just have everybody go home, right? You know what I mean? Maybe this is much more important. So more of those particular ones would be funded. The idea, though, is essentially what I'm doing is I'm strategically choosing items that I want to fund, and I'm building up items until I reach my max goal, right? So if I had a $2.5 million spend, so far you can see out of just these two portfolios, I've spent $365,000. I'd still have $2 million left to spend in my other portfolios. Right? It's a way of just having a strategic discussion. Now, I have not put together projects yet, right? That's step 3. But what I've done is out of all the possible stuff I could do, I've received input and we've had a great conversation that we can use to back up these decisions, right? That we can make presentations off of, that we can stand in front of a board and lay out not just, well, we want to replace the carpet. No. I want to do this because this is why, and it'll accomplish that in the end. This will be the impact of my decisions and my plan. Right? So and you got to think about it. Those people have to defend their decisions as well. Like it's not just you defending. They might have to talk to the press. They might have to talk to, big, board like actual trustees. They may have to say, well, I didn't just look at a list and just accept the same list that we had last year. What we did is we had a strategic discussion and we allowed these primary mission elements to affect our decisions, right? I mean, it all works great, right? It's becoming strategic about what we want to accomplish. The other thing it does on a nuts and bolts level is it really does allow you to go back and not spend a bunch of time further scoping, further clarifying the estimate, further working on drawings and spending money on maybe design for projects that aren't going to be funded in the near term, right? We're constantly having to make hard decisions with resources, and our resources isn't just money, it's also time. So getting that vision kind of ahead of time, right? So you understand where on the campus and what we should be focusing on, then we can go get those needs, put them together, bundle them into projects, get them really truly estimated. So that way I can come back to them and say, okay, in order to accomplish that mission, here are the specific 10 projects, because it could have been 75 needs, but we can knock them out in 10 projects, right? And then these are the ones that we want to fund. This is what we're going to move forward, yes or no. And then hopefully, 9 out of 10 go through. The 10th one, things change. They swap it out with something else, whatever. But what it isn't is working on 50 things so that way they can pick 9 or 10. Right? Getting that vision statement ahead of time is good for all the parties involved. Right? So think about the stuff that we talked about today as we went through, right? We really tried to, talk about aligning the mission and the vision to the execution, right? Strategic to tactical. How do I, have a conversation with people so therefore I can actually turn that into actual things on the ground? How do I encourage leaders to make investment decisions without picking projects? And this is not a new thing, right? Talking about the reason why and talking about what matters to you, right? That brings an emotional attachment instead of just an IQ, right? There's a little bit of EQ in there. One of the things also that it does, I want to go back to a thing. A lot of times it makes it a little bit harder to consistently ignore an area, right? If you have 5 portfolios, nobody said you have to have 10, maybe you have 4 or 5. And it's the 3rd time you're doing this planning, and it's the 3rd time that they've just said no to a portfolio where it's just 0, and you can actually lay those portfolios out, kind of show what we invested in 2018, 2019, 2020, or lay out the next 3 years, right? You actually start to see trends, and it opens up your eyes to decisions that you may not even know that you were making in the past. Right? You didn't even realize that you were kind of underfunding a certain part or a certain mission of the campus because it wasn't the #1 thing, right? It wasn't always. So I'm not saying that we're always going to, evenly share. That's not the truth. That's not what happens, and it's not what should happen. But it just gives you insight into things that you may not realize were going on with your investment decisions. The other thing it does is it allows you to really think about it in a way that's very common, to have conversations, right? It's much easier to have a quick conversation about why you're doing something than get into all the nuts and bolts of a specific project across campus, right? What is our plan for the summer? You can put that plan for your summer construction, right, in like 2 paragraphs. And then if they want to drill into the actual projects, right, you already have this like great summary of what you're doing to accomplish the mission that can be put on your website, that can be published to people across campus with a map of where you're going to be doing work, whatever it is. It creates and sets the tone for the entire conversation. It allows you to look at the big picture, right, without always focusing on the latest, loudest event. Right? I know that roof is leaking. We get it. I know that, like we know that these things on campus are always happening, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's where all our money should go just because it's a certain state. We just want to be more strategic, less reactive, more proactive, all those things that come into this. Right, so that was, that's where I wanted to talk about today. I didn't want to, go down a huge rabbit hole here, but hopefully that gives you some insight. If you've never heard of property portfolio analysis, hopefully now you have a better understanding of what it is. If it's maybe something you've heard about before, but you didn't realize how flexible it could be, how impactful it could be in these times, hopefully you got that. Right, being able to quickly put COVID or distance learning and filter down a group of 1,000 needs down to just a few that really are targeted to what people want to accomplish right now really makes a big difference. Right, get out there, get your assessment of the stuff you want to do, put together your plan, create your portfolios, answer the reason why, and you will have a strategic plan. Right, and you can have a great conversation as we move forward with these crazy days. Right, then we'll go ahead and get back to work eventually, and we'll start actually selecting the projects, funding them, and executing them. Right, so this concludes the course that I wanted to give today. We will be taking questions, so if there's any questions that I can answer about this, I'm happy to.
My apologies, I put myself on mute. First question, there are many ways to present priorities. You talked through several example methodologies. Top 5 needs associated with assess by FCI, need associated with strategic initiative, mission or current emergency, and you discussed a blended approach. But then how do you go back to how do you back this all into the you only have X% less to spend this year?
Yeah, and I think this is where let me go back a few slides. But to me, this is where this listing, let me go back in here. So this listing, let me go where I was looking at my teaching research. We decided that we wanted to invest in COVID-19. And as I drilled in, I saw this list, right? So this list is not prioritized by accident. This list uses the different ways that we talked about, right? Different factors, whatever's right for your organization to prioritize. So it could be FCI could be an influence, right? Criticality of the asset, how old the renewal is. We actually have a 6-factor algorithm that we use inside our software that takes a variety of things into place, including how important that building is to that portfolio. We actually make people rank the buildings in the portfolio. So you kind of take those things together, and what it does is it spits out this. So if they say that we're going to fund 50% of those needs, we start from the top and we go down. So 1 gets funded, 2 gets funded, 3 gets funded, 4 and 5 do not. And that's the life of it, right? So the algorithm that lists these here, right? That is where that's where sometimes the special sauce is made. And then what we're doing is you've got your different portfolios. So you're talking about where, and inside there, kind of how much goes down the list from top to bottom. Hopefully that helps. I will not tell you that there is one algorithm that is 100% the best. I really think that it's the one that you feel most accurately represents your values for the organization.
Okay, our next question is, do you have a template for project planning demonstration that you could share?
Templates based, like an Excel template, or we have.
I'll have to ask the person to explain what form they would like this in. Yes, yeah, an Excel spreadsheet.
Yeah, I don't, because we have this built right into our software. So, we have all our assets, and then we tag our assets and deficiencies with these different factors. And then we have portfolios where we can load, properties into, and it all flows into our strategic plan screen. But there might be one on the internet. I mean, I did not invent property portfolio analysis, right? This is not a trademarked thing, right? This is just a strategic way to look at how you can look at needs and things like that.
Okay, thank you. Our next question is, are you aware of any COVID-19 priority list?
I have seen a bunch of articles. I don't know about priority list, that might be a strong word, but I have seen numerous articles online where people are talking about, kind of the top 6 things that you should look at. Some of them involve, obviously creating social distancing where one doesn't exist, no touch entry, sneeze guards, what's some other things? Barriers for external, right? So there was an interesting example that was given on one of the Apple webinars where they were talking about an on-campus daycare center where they were actually going to create barriers on the recess playground, so that way possibly, if you had a couple classes going out at once, they weren't intermingling, right? So there's just a bunch of unique ideas. And I think that's going to take talking to your own group to understand kind of where this unique stuff comes from. But there are articles online that I've seen that list kind of the top 5 things you should be thinking of.
Okay. Well, again, if you have any questions for Glenn, please type them in the chat box. We'd love to be able to answer more questions if anyone has them. Kevin, do you have anything you would like to provide?
Thank you, Billy. I would just say, I guess I would invite folks to visit our website, which is goassetworks.com. We actually have a COVID-19 resource center, and we've conducted our Asset World, which is an annual event. We've transformed that into an online event this year with a series of online webinars. So we're doing a lot of activities that may be useful for some of the folks online. So I'd encourage everybody to visit our website and check those resources out. I think that's all I would have to add at this point. And certainly you're welcome to reach out to Glenn or myself, and we can help you out in any way or connect you with other resources that can.
Glenn, did you have a contact slide on this on the presentation slide?
I was going to say, I don't know if at the end we have. No, we don't think we have our website on here. Go
Okay.
ask it.
Well,
and
yeah, what we'll do is I'll add it to the presentation slide that I send out to everybody that they'll get in the next couple of days.
okay.
Okay, well, I think you've given people a ton of things. Oh, got more questions coming in. How do you handle common assets such as central plants or common BAS systems that serve multiple properties?
Sure. So that's actually a very good question. So the property itself, you can actually have the asset tied to the deficiency that's tied to the building. So that's how do I want to say this? So the asset itself, the system that you're actually going to be investing in, does not have to actually live in the building that it affects. Right. So if we had actual project over on one side, you could say, hey, I'm actually going to invest in the central plant, but the thing that I'm investing in is just chiller, and it's actually an asset. So if I want to say that, it's important that I do it for this other building in this portfolio, right, that asset feeds that property, right? So therefore you can include it in that other portfolio. You have to be a little bit careful that you don't have the same needs show up in multiple portfolios, because you'll inflate your ask. Right. So there might be something where you had a portfolio that was called infrastructure. Right. Maybe that's what we just put it under. So it's under a single location. But if I'm trying to make a case that I want to invest in a central plant, then I would probably pick my most important portfolio, and I would tag that project that it would affect this building, because that is the indirect effect. So two different ways to show it that way, right? Either under an infrastructure portfolio or tagging the asset to the building that it would most affect.
Okay, thank you. And I have someone who's asking if you have any case studies available on your website.
I can take that, and yes, there are a number of case studies published right on our website. Plus, we have additional ones if there's a specific scenario you're looking for. We probably have one in our library, so that's something that I can help match up for folks.
Okay, all right. Let me see here real quick. I was curious if how Asset Works automates this methodology. Or would that be a question better resolved offline?
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to have a offline discussion. I mean, for automation, to me, as you put the assets in, right, as you put the stuff in, you're actually tagging the need. So for us, the automation of this becomes a lot easier, because it's essentially for us a database thing. So I build a portfolio, I add properties to the portfolio. I automatically know that all the needs have been tied to the properties. So therefore, the needs roll up to the properties and roll up to the portfolio. So our strategic plan screen, you go to it and it's already all filled in, because you've done the work when you entered the need. Right, you actually tagged it with a reason why you would do it. You tagged it with the building. You tag, right, and you can do this in a field. We have a mobile application that you can walk through a building and actually enter this information in and take a picture of it and do things like that. So the idea that you're kind of feeding the needs and then it goes into a place. And then we have the ability on that strategic plan to filter it in a variety of ways. So maybe you only want to show certain portfolios, or you only want to show certain planning groups, right? So you can actually do some scenario building and save multiples. So when we say automate, I mean, we're kind of using the benefit of a system to do that. We do have some other things around prioritization. So if you kind of want to know a little bit more about building conditioning modeling, where we can kind of tell you what your worst buildings are, there are some, kind of neat functionality and neat things that we can do. But that's more of a kind of come talk to us and we'll show you our software kind of thing.
Thank you. Does your software track the certification and inspection of roof anchors used for window washing and facade maintenance?
Ooh, That's a pretty specific question. Let's not talk about a specific thing. Let's just talk about an attribute, right? So if you actually had a specific thing that you needed to have required as an attribute on a particular asset, such as a roof, and you wanted to say, has this been certified? Yes, absolutely. We can go in, we can mark it as certified, and we can add the certification to that particular, related document. So that could be anything, right? Any type of thing that you wanted to track. Has this been accomplished? And which ones haven't been accomplished, and when are they due, right? Of course, we can track data like that, but that's a little bit specific for this conversation.
Thank you very much for answering that. Is your term portfolio, or is your term planning group synonymous with your term portfolio group?
No, a property portfolio is a collection of buildings with a common strategic mission, right? A planning group, you can better say that is the reason why I would want to accomplish a need, right? Why would I want to make this investment? I need to make this investment because we need to have a response for COVID-19. I need to make this investment because my asset, my system needs to be reliable. When I turn that light switch on, it needs to come on, right? So that's planning group, where my property portfolio, right? That portfolio is the listing of buildings with a common strategic mission.
Okay, thank you. I have someone says, thinking out loud, it might be a good idea to add COVID priority to any DR list. Your thoughts?
That might be a way. If you had an algorithm where you had multiple inputs, that might bring things to the top. But realistically, the reason why you would do it, is it? I mean, I think that would be kind of hard. Like, is it kind of related, or does it kind of make an impact? Sometimes we can get a little too nuanced, right? Maybe sometimes just a little bit more blunt approach is better for discussion. Then we're not debating of how impactful this would be. It's like, why would you do that? Well, I need to do this for COVID response. You know what I mean? And then we can look at them and we can list them and understand that. And that's what I was kind of saying is, it's better to be able to look at one thing and kind of compare it directly with another based on the reason why, that impact, rather than trying to look at a thing that was really a reliability issue versus COVID, right? You know what I mean? Like, if you're really investing in that electrical distribution system so it turns on, it's not really a COVID reason. I mean, like, I don't know, it's just a little bit different. And I think sometimes we can just get a little too cute, and it actually muddies the conversation than kind of keeping it straightforward and simple.
Great, thank you. Next, are there opportunities to incorporate longer-term vulnerabilities related to changing climate risks? For example, increasing humidity or floor risk change the expected reliability of an asset. How is that incorporated into the portfolio assessment?
It sounds to me like what we're talking about is the renewal year of the actual need, right? So if I'm going to make an investment and I know that my expected asset is supposed to last a certain amount of time, there are a couple different ways we can do that. So first off, we talk about climate zones, right? That's a common thing where an industry specification may say something's going to last 20 years, but because I live in Alaska versus Florida, maybe one lasts 22 and one lasts 18. So we can do that. Also, we can program algorithms in there where if you expect based on a certain thing that based on weather normalization or something, I mean, I guess we could come up with some engineering algorithm. We don't personally have any of those out of the box. I think that that'd be, I mean, maybe that would be valuable, right? That could be valuable. A lot of times what we say is, as things get closer to when they're supposed to be discovered and when they're supposed to be renewed, what we're going to be doing is actually going out and inspecting those. So to me, understanding the ballpark, the frame, that window. Remember, strategic plan, there are multiples. So like, we can do a 1 or 2 year plan, but a lot of times we're also doing a 5 and 10 year plan, right? So understanding kind of when things are supposed to fall within that 5 year or 10 year window. As we get closer, we're going to go out and actually do visual inspections. We're going to take a look at these particular things that our system is kind of alerting us to that are going to need to be replaced. So, that 10-year plan that I create, that influences my strategic savings and my planning. But 10 years from now, that's not going to be the plan I'm working off of, right? It's going to be the plan that year that was influenced by my other plans. I mean, we don't do stuff like that out of the box, but I think that's I would want to know the use case. I mean, like to really get into the nuts and bolts of the value of that, versus kind of just going out and just kind of checking on it when it falls within your window. Is the juice worth the squeeze kind of thing? Maybe that's a good way to say that.
Well, thank you very much. Well, that looks like it's the end of our questions. So Glenn, I want to thank you very much. Kevin, again, thank you for your input today. Our attendees, I want to thank you very much for taking time out of your busy schedules. I would like to wish everybody a great Memorial weekend. Be safe, stay healthy. Until next time, have a great day. Bye-bye now.